Evening all on PlayChess and YouTube, streaming to YouTube. Okay, let's see. So this week I thought it would be nice to have a look at Fabiano Caruana. So he played in the Dortmund tournament in Germany, and he managed to win that tournament, and I think get over 2,800 just about on the FIDE rating list, the live FIDE rating list at least. So he's a force to be reckoned with, and I thought we could look at some of his decisive games and maybe a few more of his games from the past after, if there's time. So this first game to look at, David Baramidze, a 2-6-1-6, playing white against Fabiano Caruana, played d4, and something very interesting happened here. Instead of like the Slav defense or the Grunfeld, we see the Dutch defense, very aggressive opening statement to be made. g3, knight f6, and we see actually d6 here. So black might be already threatening e5, so white discourages that. And now we see the Leningrad Dutch, which is this fianchetto. So Leningrad Dutch defense is where you fianchetto the bishop here. And this is one of my favourites actually. So this game already has special interest for me personally. It's I think an exciting attacking system with black really. And I first was impressed with it a few years back at a tournament where basically black played the fianchetto and played queen e8 and then pushed through with e4. This is one of the standard plans. It kind of locks out this bishop if you can do this. So white castled, bishop g7, c4, black castled, knight c3, and lo and behold we do get queen e8. So I was aware of this plan. The problem is c7 is sometimes a problem. If that's neglected, but other than that the queen is useful here. We see rook e1, which is interesting, and I'll put on the Kibitzer here actually. Okay, if we add a Kibitzer, stockfish, I think I'll add 5. So we see here an interesting move, queen f7, looking at that c pawn. Try and win that potentially, ignoring knight g5. It looks dangerous maybe sometimes, this knight g5, but here apparently this isn't working. This doesn't do anything. It just actually though, even this position, it offers white some compensation. White didn't do that. White played b3, the more cautious b3. Now we see knight e4 hitting that c3 knight, so energetic play from Fabiano. Queen c6, knight c6 now hitting d4, so continual threats being created. Bishop e3 now is played. Now knight takes, queen takes, which creates that pin on the d pawn. I think here you can say that black has had quite a pleasant opening so far in this game, and the engine reckons black's at least equal here now. d5, the knight actually drops back to b8. It can maybe sometimes go like this or like this to cover c5. Rook ac1, h6, snuffing out knight g5 as a potential useful move. c5, it looks as though this c5 is useful for white. Now we see knight a6, so not only, well, it's defending that entry point, that c7 entry point here. C takes, c takes. Now we see h4. This might be a slightly weakening move, that g4 square in principle, but clearly black was, threatening g5, gaining space, and that could be very, very annoying with f4 later, squashing the bishop, and then g4. So white wanted to do something about that. So what would white do if he doesn't do that? The engine actually gives knight d2 as an alternative. If g5, knight c4, looking at here, this would be an interesting game as well. Tucking the bishop on f2 maybe is viable, and that seems viable. But still, black would be okay here, doing well. Okay, so if we go back to this position, so g5 looked like a positional threat. It was extinguished with h4. So bishop d7. And of course e4 at any point needs to be calculated all the time. Here, if e4 here, knight d4 is okay. And it doesn't matter even about losing this pawn. This is good compensation for white. Black doesn't really want to do that. He'll be exposing d6 potentially underneath that pawn. No, he just played bishop d7. So queen d2, king h7. Now that's actually reinforced quite well. b6, which means that knight c5 is now on the cards. I haven't asked much this game, have I? Knight e1. Is anyone still awake? I just want to say hi there on stream. So knight e1. We see rook ac8. Knight d3. Now knight comes to c5. So inviting, that would be nice for black to get a pawn to the centre. Knight b2 though. Queen e7. b4 kicking that knight. Knight a4. That takes. And actually, we get a lot of simplification now. But all the rooks nearly coming off. Now they come off. And actually the queens come off. And you might think, well, white's playing for a draw. Can Caruana grind anything out here? He is higher rated. He's 2789. So he's significantly higher rated actually to his opponent 2616. But can white really lose this? Bishop c2. Okay, we see now a positional grind actually. Quite a long involved positional grind. I think I'm going to fast forward through some of this because let's see, bishop f6. So we see now another pawn on the light square. f4. This is interesting for bishop h4. White wants to avoid that. So that's fixed that h4 pawn weakness. And we get this position where it seems as though, okay, black's got that passed pawn. Is that significant? Well, there's pressure now on f3. h3 trying to undermine the whole pawn chain. So black has actually emerged with something, a passed pawn here now. So he's positionally kind of outplaying, it seems, white. But is this really enough? So we get now that king looking in a dangerous spot here, potentially. a5, letting the pawn go. Is this enough though? Because now b6 is under fire. So is black too defensive to be able to win this? Well, he makes some headway here. And now he's weaving in white's position. Trying to gain some space there. It looks as though white's got a fortress for a moment. f3. Now f2, giving up a pawn to try and grab the f3 square. If king takes f2 here, then the check is useful, and then after this, this is good to win e4. So f2 is a dangerous move, and actually black is now clearly better after this. Maybe it was white's last move didn't help. Okay, so now this king f3, e4 pawn is dropping off, and that means d5 is going to be a bit weaker. Or is it? The b5 is looked at. No, the e4 is dropping off, d5 is weaker. And here, after the check, actually white resigns here. This is much better because d5 is dropping off now. If king d2, then bishop f7, and this is looking hopeless. Say check, we can take here quite safely. So it was a bit of a grind, that game, but a very important win against a high level opponent. Let's go on to another game from this tournament. Now against Ponomariov. This is slightly more. It's got some interest points, combinational interest points. So Caruana playing white. Okay, so we see e4 against Ruslan Ponomariov, who is a past FIDE world champion, by the way. So knight f3, knight f6, knight takes. This is the Petrov defense. But white injects some spice into this with this move, which is gaining popularity, this knight c3 move here. So it's breaking the dreaded symmetrical pawn structures. White's even having... So white invites double pawns to get some dynamic, interesting play, with the possibility of castling queenside, which is now done, queenside. So it makes for an interesting game. King b1, bishop f6. We see h3, h6, b3, a6. Now g4, gaining a bit of space, restricting that bishop a bit. Black castles queenside as well. So black here has played quite cautiously and solidly. Bishop g2, now g5, quite radical actually, but fixing g4, so maybe in the future black might entertain h5. Knight d4, looking at that bishop, that's taken, which undoubles white's pawns here, d5. Now f4, okay, g takes, bishop takes. Now finally, yeah, this structure looks to be as though this potentially vulnerable to h5, but white's not too concerned about giving up the f5 square. He plays g5, gaining some space. And also, if you look here, there's a backward pawn on this file, which could be targeted. Rook d1, h4, bishop e5, queen f4, looking at that pawn, and it's protected by e6 at the moment. Bishop f1, so bishop d3, king b2. Now black took on e5, rook takes, rook g7, a4, king a2, queen d2. So manoeuvring here, looking at a5 now. Black played king b8 here, so prepared to swap, I think, a5 for g5 if it takes here. I think this would be okay. Rook g5, black might actually be totally okay. So black played king b8. We see queen f4, and again it looks as though, okay, how can white make progress? Well, with this last move, he's actually offering h3 here, and that's taken. So the consequence is now there's pressure to regain the pawn now. Rook takes, queen takes. Queen, this is quite a weakening move, b6. You might not think it should have fatal consequences at all for black's king, but just bear in mind it's quite a dangerous weakening move. White has got the light square bishop here, so tactically it might be a cause for concern later. Queen h6, and now the queen goes to c6, bishop e6. Now g6, which looks as though there's no entry points to look forward to here, if that's just ignored with this. G takes, bishop takes. But there's a remarkable move played in this position. And now there's also a good time to test if any of you are still awake here. So white's play, if I gave you 20 seconds, what would you play here with white? So 20 seconds starting from now. So white's play. So what would you play as white? Any ideas? So there's no entry point, it seems, on e8. So we have this theoretical idea, yeah, that these squares are weakened, yeah, because these pawns are on dark squares. We have a theoretical idea that these pawns are weakened, But I wonder, can you really tap into a theoretical idea here through practical means? I wonder if anyone can spot it on. Someone's seen the game, so won't you? Thank you, AVB. It's really quite interesting. It took me by surprise, actually, totally. When I was playing through this game earlier, it took me by surprise. Any ideas? Do you want to throw them out there? Any ideas? Anyone want to say? I think it's been 20 seconds. No one wants to indicate a move here. I think I should have started with sacrifices earlier in this session. I don't know if anyone's still awake here now. So I might have to play this move. B4's been mentioned. It wasn't B4. Let's have B4 might actually be good for white though. It is quite dangerous. So it takes A5. This is dangerous actually. For example, like this, it is actually a good move, and looks as though it should be crushing as well. But what is played is actually really fantastic. I think after B4, is there a defense? The engine suggests Rook G8. This doesn't look good, I gotta say, if this is the best defense. So B4 is a good try. I think definitely some points for that. Anything else? It's probably winning by force B4, but this is even more elegant. Okay, Rook E7 was played. So it pins there, attacks its invasion on the 7th. Okay, so black can't tolerate that rook, really. If bishop E8 to unpin, well, we can just snap off that bishop there like that. So black takes that. And now can you see what white plays in this position? So what's the idea? So white play here. All right. Okay. Yeah. Bishop A6. I think okay. So it threatens mate. There's no defense to that. So takes was played and we have checkmate. So that was a cute finish. I thought, yeah, that was quite interesting. So the Petrov was ground down with this trendy system. And, you know, a few months ago I thought, is this system really serious? Would serious players really adopt this system? Because it is, you know, doubled pawns and seemingly a bit risky, but it seems to be very, very popular against Petrov. Great news. So there's life in the old Petrov as white. So let's have a look now against the game against George Mayer. Caruana playing white again. E4. And the funny thing about this is this game I did actually try and properly video annotate about 2-3 days ago, and I had a kind of the positions are actually very, very complicated, and I ended up going around in circles in my analysis, and I just couldn't bring myself to edit the final thing. So I've got quite a good idea, more than usual, about this game we're about to see against George Mayer. And it's very, very interesting how the counterplay was squashed. So a French defence, the classical system by George, and this is all standard stuff so far, theoretical. So white plays queen d2 and usually is trying to castle queenside again. So castles queenside. We see queen f2. Standard stuff. Black takes. Now we see b5. Bishop e3. So with bishop e3, okay, now black played queen a5, looking at the a pawns, that's protected. b4, the knight goes back. Now that's a very nice square, you know, for that retreat to make available to the knight, that d4 square, which is now used, knight d4. So that's the idea. So white's creating this blockade on d4, very powerful blockade, and all the pieces are aligned to that at the moment. They're aligned to that blockade square on d4. And this game, you know, after knight takes d4, bishop takes d4, there's a certain beautiful thing here after a5, which white could make use of, and he does. He forcibly tries to remove this knight with bishop b5. So black did weaken that b5 square. So the idea of snapping this knight off, the knight can't go to b6. We've got that battery. Doesn't really want to go here. That's a bit defeatist. And actually loses the exchange. I think bishop c5 would actually win the exchange, like this. So knight b8 isn't an option even, and that's quite beautiful. There's nothing black can do to avoid the exchange. So bishop a6, bishop takes, queen takes, and now white has a thematic plan, you know, going like this. Actually, with such a thematic plan, one of my good friends, Paul Georgiou, once beat the legend David Bronstein in one of the Voice About Masters. Not in this particular position, just as a thematic plan. White has got this kind of advantage over here in pawns, being able to sort of avalanche over here. And so plays for this, you know, g4, this f5, this f6 is dangerous. a4, and black tries to generate some counterplay on the queen side. So we see this being fixed, b3, queen c6, f5. So f6 is now looking dangerous. Rook d2, trying to keep control of a2 when this happens. We've got control of a2. Black now tries to put pressure on these points, as well as d3, because we see with this move, this will create a dangerous point d3 soon. So here, rook e3, safeguarding b3. If white played too casually, I mean, let's see the sort of disaster which might happen. It starts to get dangerous anyway. So white's trying to keep on top of things with rook e3. Now this is threatening a mate in 1. Queen e1, queen d1, delicate manoeuvring. Looks at b3 and d3. Rook e1. All this quiet little moves, and now white does seem a bit more ready to consider f6 soon. But here, actually, I think f6 in this particular position might be a bad idea, because there's a rude move black would have available. So white was very wise, it seems, to avoid f6 from a technical perspective. Can you see what resource black would have in this particular position if f6 had been played here? I think it's a standard FIDE time control, by the way. Whatever the FIDE time controls are. So if f6 had been played, what would you play as black in this position? If I gave you 20 seconds starting from now. Any ideas? I just want to show the power of his prophylaxis moves. So this is, because if you understand this threat, you understand prophylaxis, which was used to avoid it. Alright, now Gearcom Playchess has mentioned rook c2. That does look a little bit dangerous, but I'm not sure. White can maybe just run here after taking, If taking here, I don't think the steam. I think the steam runs out. Bishop b2. And if bishop d3 here, I don't think that's particularly good. Just here, and the steam runs out again. Bishop b2. So it's not rook c2. So what would you play with black? It's not rook c2. All right, now a few ideas. Queen a3, rook c3, d3. Now bishop d3 is mentioned by Gick. And bishop d3. No, I think we just take that. No. The move would be dangerous. Is rook c3. So if taking, this is no good. For example, d4 here, and then there's d3 to follow, and it kind of collapses white's position. These two pawns out of nowhere is a total disaster. Although f7 looks dangerous, bishop e8, and now black's threatening c2 and a mate in 5. So that would be like winning material. It would be horrible. So all of that is avoided. And here you might think, well, if queen d1 or queen goes somewhere else, bishop d3 check is nasty. Rook c2 check. Rook takes c2. Well, we're getting mated. So yeah, it's an important safety point here. Prophylaxis. So basically in this position, rook ed1 was played, just safeguarding d3 even more. You might think now the whole rook c3 concept is harmless here, because taking, and then there's just rook c2, so the rook handle d3. There's nothing here. d4, just we take that. Okay, so here, black's counterplay had to be stopped in its tracks, and what this means is actually that white's play on the king side now is starting to be without any counterplay, basically. So queen a3, bishop drops back. Well, there was a threat of rook c1, rather crude, to make here. So bishop b2, queen a6, queen e3. So everything's on that d3 square for the moment. And now also this f6 in here looks menacing. King h8, f6. White's really in the driving seat here. Black played g takes. I don't think g6 is any use here. Well, it's in the long run, white's doing well here. So anyway, that was taken, and it is very dangerous now. g5, h6, very provocative. White just reinforces that g5 pawn, and this was a terrible blunder actually. Rook c8. This move here is under great pressure, I guess. Technically, if black wanted to provide maximum resistance, it seems rook g6 doesn't lose immediately. And I went around in circles on this position a few days back trying to sort of analyse it. And it's not entirely immediately a knockout blow or anything, but it's pretty miserable for black if white is building up this position systematically. That's all I want to say about this rook g6. But this rook c8 allowed now a crushing blow in this position, an absolutely crushing blow. Can you see what white plays in this position? And of course, I don't know if this is clearly shown, but I'm impressed by all the prophylaxis earlier on d3 to get to this position with the attack. But now, how can white proceed with his attack? So white play here. What move would you play here as white? If I give you 20 seconds starting from now. Francino. Yeah, I think you got the idea. Anyone on stream? Tube stream? What would you play here with white? Actually, it's sort of asking for it, this move, really. Now I think about it, should I be asking this question? It looks as though, you know, well, yeah, what move looks absolutely obvious and crushing, basically, here for white? I think it's just the 20-second delay, which is, I hope the chat's still working. Put hi there. Yeah. Okay, so most of you said... okay, let's just examine Queen H3. That might offer Rook G6 here. So you want to like extinguish Rook G6, so G6. And look at this bishop, this fine bishop on the diagonal. So if F takes... Well, if F takes, actually, we don't even worry about the bishop. We just do this mate. So G6 is pretty crushing, really. And I think black just resigns here after G6. If here we just take the rook first, and then we're going to take on here. So it's all crashed through, and yeah, what can we do about this? Nothing. So that's the end of that game. So I thought that was nice controlled counterplay earlier on. Now, one last game from this event to show you is against Michael Adams, UK's #1 Grandmaster on the FIDE racing list. Michael Adams, who I've known throughout my junior years in chess, actually, a little bit. So Fabiano playing white. Adams elects that solid Berlin wall, Berlin defense. And Fabiano had actually played this system himself at least 2 times in this same tournament. Very solid system. Okay, you have the exchange of queens variation, very trendy at high levels. Bishop e7, black has that bishop pair. And what was vivid about this game is something I haven't seen spelled out so clearly in other games. Is if we look structurally at this position, you might notice something structurally, that the 3 over here are kind of matched by the 3 over here if we include these double pawns. Yeah, but we've actually got a 4-3 pawn majority here, and it's this 4-3 here which you don't usually see as a problem after this kind of opening, but will we see it as a problem in this game? Watch out for this 4-3. Okay, so king c8, g4. We have an exchange of knights. Bishop e3. Here, I'm wondering if there's venom with the c5 square. If the bishop goes back, I just want to check something. And I think that might be okay, actually, to go back. But Adams played b6. Okay, c5 now, which gives up that d5 square. You might think, well, why does black want to give up the d5 square? I think it's to be able to put the bishop here on this diagonal. Usually, try and keep solid like that, because white is threatening now that bishop. Or knight takes c7. Maybe that's more accurate. Knight takes c7. Okay, so the bishop's there. Bishop f4. King g2. c4. Okay, a5. And yeah, bishop g3. And have a look at the pawn structure now. What do you think about this? 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a simple truth in this position about this pawn majority, but normally you wouldn't see this simple truth expressed. You know, what did Kasparov do against Kramnik in the Brain Games match against this opening? Nothing. It was all draws. But there is a simple truth, it seems, about this position, the pawn majority. So if I polled you here, would you really believe the pawn majority on the king side is enough to win this game? This seems to be a very standard position you might get from this very solid defence. Should that pawn majority be enough to win the game? What do you guys think at this stage? Yes or no? Do you think white should be able to win with the pawn majority or not? So you see this 4-3 pawn majority. You see with the double pawns, structurally, these pawns, there's less possibility of a passed pawn. So the question, yeah, do the passed pawns, should they win or not? Well, maybe the position is still too complex really to judge. So let's carry on. Black now played f6. Immediately trying to undermine things. And it's immediately quite tricky, surely. Because actually, if e6, that looks tempting. But Adams could here play rook d6 and that pawn looks weak. Yeah. We can take this off. And take this off. And king c8. And actually this pawn is weak. So it's not like that. So actually, after f6 we see f4. And we see rook e6 here. Rook goes back. What was black threatening? Anything in particular? I'm not sure. Okay, rook dd1. F takes. Rook takes. Rook ed6. And we see f5. So look at the pawns now. 3-2. Like this. d5 is gripped with both rooks. a4. King f4. b5. Trying to undermine d5. That's supported. a3 is a dangerous looking pawn if it later it might be. King e4, b4. So full lockdown on these dark squares. These pawns are now locked against each other here, but we still have this 3-2 here. So a very simple truth in the position here. This 3-2. Is that really enough to win? h4. So it looks as though g5 is going to be a bit of fun. Here. Rook d2, rook f7. But does g5 have a downside? If takes, doesn't black hijack the h file down here? g5 was played, h takes, and the rook did use that h file. King f4, rook h1. If given, well, it looks annoying for this check. Rook f2 stopping that check. Now knight e7, and it looks as though g6 is starting to be dangerous. Bishop h1, g6. Something important though about, something important here about knight e7 is also potentially it's looking at c5 if the knight wasn't loose. So at this point the knight stops being loose. And white can actually take this pawn, and he does. Pawn up. And still, this pawn majority. Rook d6. Check. And white is careful not to be too greedy here. If white takes on b4, that must come with punishment. Check would be punishing, apparently. If the king moves here, then this knight is going to be lost. So, and if the king, well, where else can the king go? Actually, if the king goes here, then check, and then this is horrible. We can take here, check. So, no, shouldn't be too greedy here. Knight d5 was played. Which looks at b6 actually, so there's no time for c6 because there's rook. Well, there's knight c7 check as well. Actually, knight c7, and then check here. This is fine. This position for white, so that's not a problem. c6. Black is a pawn down, and still has these passed pawn issues. Bishop takes d5. Rook takes. So we've simplified now. Unfortunately, black seems to be in a bad state here. A pawn down, and we've still got this horrible pawn majority. And actually, white's play here. So what do you reckon white plays in this position? So if I gave you 20 seconds starting from now, white's play here, what would you play with white? Oh, pardon me. Any ideas? What would you play with white here? Rook e2. Actually, there's probably a few winning moves. Actually, is Rook e2 winning? Probably close to winning, but actually f6 is probably the crispest. So the idea here is, the pass pawn theme. If Rook takes, we just play f7, and if check, we just move the king here, or g3, and this pawn is queening. So this is quite crushing. F6. And if g takes, we can play king f5, and we're just going to march this pawn soon. We're going to just take here, and then simple as that. Yeah, we're going to queen that pawn. So f6 is pretty much all over. The game saw a few more moves. G takes. Actually, this did happen. King. It seems it did happen like this. King takes g7. c5. Is there one last trick here for black with these pawns? One last trick. White, if white plays king f7, this might be a little bit of a problem. For example, like this, king c3. And this is equal, actually. This would be dead equal, this position. Because of b3. This is drawing. If check here, king here. This is drawing. If we go back here, I think black will aim for a stalemate. Yeah? Like this. I think a2 will do it. So that's no good. So this was all avoided, actually, because guess what white played in this position. So white's play here, the final move of the game. What would you play with white in this position? Shows caution's needed, isn't it? So this pawn did mean something potentially. So white's play, how would you finish this game? Any ideas? Still got the chat, have we? Alright, as this next move simplifies the win. Just check with the idea of building that bridge. So if king d4, well, black resign. If king d4, we just play rook g5. So that's if check here, then here. Okay, so very simple. So just avoiding the complications. Rook f5. If here, again, rook g5. Okay, so as simple as that. So congratulations to Fabiano Caruana. I did actually check out some. I got some sacrificial fragments. I thought this would add a bit of spice to this broadcast. I didn't want to go over his draws actually particularly. I didn't want to inflict any torture on anyone, including myself. So, but there were solid, well-fought draws with Black. But I've got some sacrifices instead from other parts of his career now to look at, which you might not have seen before. We could spend some time on these maybe. So I'm going to take you to different games from other tournaments now. In Dresden 2008, Fabiano had this amazing finish here against Emanuel Berg in the Olympiad in Dresden, Germany, 2008. He just played Queen h4 and Berg had played Knight d7. Can you guess what White played here? So switching position game and tournament to 2008 now. But this was pretty fantastic if you haven't seen this before. This was amazing. So White to play here. What would you play as White? I've possibly showed... I don't know if I've showed this at some point on the channel before. Any ideas? A bit of a delay here again. So this is Caruana versus Berg in 2008. Alright, so this was amazing. Knight takes f7, drawing the king out. Okay. Now rook takes e6, drawing the king even further out. If king takes here, this wasn't played, then we have check, and this is really dangerous. If bishop d5, check, like here, and this is a mate in 5, like this. So after rook takes e6, this was knight c5 was played, and we have rook takes d6, rook takes, check, check, bishop b5 check, check. Now rook takes d6, sorry, bishop takes d6, and now here, can you guess the final move? Dismantling Black totally. In this position, what did White play here? If I give you 20 seconds starting from now. Any ideas here? So testing your tactics here. So it shows Caruana's great tactical strengths as well, these earlier games. How he shot to fame. This was when he was 2640 FIDE rating. Berg was 2623. 2008. Finished off this position with any ideas here? We've got a 20-second delay. So white's play. Yeah, this was neat. Mopping up job. Rook takes e6. So if here we just play the rook e1 is check. So queen takes, and now bishop takes c6. And so this is just winning. We can just take here and then take the rook. So that was pretty neat. Combinatory sequence. Now let's have a look at a game against Anish Giri in 2012. Weekend Z 2012. Oh, can I load it? Oh, I understand the problem. Okay, against Giri in 2012, we see bishop e2. So Fabiano White against Giri, he was 2736. Only 2012. Giri played f6. White play here. Can you guess what White played in this position? So f6 had just been played. So what do you do with the knight? What do you do? Sorry, not what do you do with the knight. What would you play here with white? White's play here. This is quite amazing. Positional kind of sacrifice. It's quite an evolved continuation actually after. I'll give you a shot though at what would you play here if you were thinking dynamically. So without the dynamism of chess, I don't think it will be as worth playing, basically. Well, at least for me. I love the dynamism of chess, so this is really dynamic stuff. This position for white. What did white play here? Any ideas? Still got the chat. So this is Caruana versus Giri in 2012. Knight takes c6. I'm not sure that's that interesting. I think just taking. No, more interesting. Bishop takes. Okay. This actually, technically, the engine actually quite likes this. Is gaining an advantage after knight takes. There's 2 pawns there to start off with. 3 pawns. So 3 pawns for the bishop, and it just gets very dangerous. it's a bit involved the rest of the game, but the sacrifice for 3 pawns I thought was impressive. Black starts to get squashed now with the pawns. D6, so his king safety's affected. C takes, knight e7, rook c7, a lot of pressure emerging. This is how the game finished. Continued. A6, A7. It was a bit of a squish after, so Queen F2, looking at H4 now. Queen takes, yeah, cracked into the king side, and it all fell apart there, and Black resigned here. But the point of interest was the piece sack for the pawns. Obviously, there's a lot of analysis that could be done on this game fragment. Against Kariakin in 2012, Sao Paulo, Brazil. So in Brazil, 2012, he was playing black against Kariakin, who just played G4 here. Can you guess what? So Caruana playing black. It's got the black pieces. So what would you play here with black? If you had the black pieces here, what would you play? Actually, it's a really good position anyway. From there's other moves apart from the game continuation. So, Kariakin versus Caruana in 2012. What would you play here? Anybody? So with black, what would you play here? Any thoughts? Dynamic potential of the pieces being demonstrated, and king safety. Any ideas? So black to play. There's a mention of knight takes g4. Does that actually work? Knight g4? No, I think white just plays this. H takes. That's not the idea. No, black played. There's other ideas which the engine suggests, but we're going to see what he played. Knight takes e4. So we get one exchange sack. We get this position, and white now plays queen c2. That's defended. So here, if the bishop, the bishop hasn't got any squares. If bishop d2, we just play rook e2. We're on f2. That's horrible. I think, because actually rook e1 here, knight e5 is problematic. So actually, in this position, rook g1 was played. So one exchange sack has already been played. So what does black now play in this position? So black's play here And actually the engine likes this here as well. I don't know, maybe I should just show you. It's quite involved really, but no, it is. I think technically the best move here. So black is the exchange down for a pawn right now. What does he play in this position? Any thoughts? I don't know if our delay's bigger than usual here. Black's play. Oh. Okay, another exchange that rook takes e3. Yes, this is really cool. After takes, queen takes. We've broken into the dark squares. White played this, and we have bishop e2 now. Looking at winning that. Also trying to undermine this diagonal if the knight ever moves. Queen f5. Bishop d3, queen d7, check, king h1. If knight takes e5, check, check. It's horrendous. It's horrendous. So we see king h1, bishop e4. Look at that nasty pin. Check, knight f8. And white is helpless here. Look at these amazing bishops. Absolutely amazing bishops. No defense. If king g2, we just played check here. This is getting nasty. Oh, we mate. So white had to resign here. Impressive. 2012. The rise of Caruana. I guess most of you have seen the game against Magnus Carlsen in 2012. But let's go to the endgame position. Magnus had played rook takes b4. We have rook takes e6. Magnus Carlsen playing black, coming down with his king. Played now bishop e4. So Fabiano to play here against Magnus Carlsen in 2012. I guess most of you have seen this game. It's just a reminder. So what is white playing this position? Magnus has just played bishop e4. Maybe looking forward to rook b2 to gang up on this pawn. This actually, this might not have been entirely apparently this might not have been entirely winning, so I'm not sure I should even mention this. Okay, but let's do it. Let's see the practical game continuation. Apparently it wasn't winning from the engine view at the moment. This wasn't a winning move, but it was interesting anyway. So what would you play here with white? So Caruana versus Carlsen, Bilbao Masters 2012. White's play. This was a move 79 actually. Any thoughts? It is. Yeah, I think. Okay, this was played. Apparently, this is not entirely winning. Right now, here f5 was played, so this pawn looks quite dangerous. If d5, apparently just rook b5, and then check. This is no good. So f5 was now played, and king g2 now. This was a huge blunder. King g2. Magnus just blundered here. Apparently, he can play rook b1 and salvage the position here. f6. If rook f1, d5 is still winning for white. This pawn is going to be winning. Interestingly, king g2 leaves white in trouble in this position. If d5, then king f3. Wow. So if f7, check. Here, we've got this e2 coming up. So it doesn't matter about the pawn. So Magnus missed the chance here, it seems, technically. King g2 in this position. When in fact, so rook b1 was needed here, or rook b2. King g2 here. We see king e3, rook b2, and this is another blunder. Black should have played rook b1 or even the check. For example, the check. If we take, that's winning for black. If we play this here, this should be okay for black. It's all pretty tricky actually, but apparently this is okay. This is equal. Very involved stuff. Yeah, like this. So it's actually really mega complex actually. So king e3 in the game, rook b2 was a blunder apparently, technically, because of d5. And we do see that this pawn, I mean these pawns are dangerous. Takes d6, c3, d7. Now white can queen here, because the pawns are not too dangerous at all. So white was winning that. Okay, a bit of a, yeah, it was a practical move. Rook takes e4 in the circumstance, and worked out well. But technically, yeah, Magnus had to play very, very accurately here with rook b1. So this apparently is winning for black. As I say, here, c3 check. This is another way. Rook d1, e3. This pawn is good counterplay. So anyway, that is actually mega complex position. Deep in the game at move 79, rook takes e4. Very, very complex stuff. But it, on the surface, it looked to do something with these pawns. Have I got any easier examples coming up against pawns in 2008? Actually, okay, against Francisco Pons in 2008. we saw knight b3 and black played queen b5. Okay, can you guess what white plays in this position? So Fabiano playing white against pawns in 2008. This actually, I think this is too involved now. Maybe we can carry on next week. We'll make this the last one. I think make this the last one. Actually, might be going back to Morphe next week anyway. A bit easier stuff, really. But anyway, have a go at this one. What would you play with white here? Actually, the engine really likes this move, which Fabiano played in this position. Caruana played in this position. So white play here. Interesting. Have you all caught up with this position? So this is Caruana against Pons 2008. Alright, yeah, rook f5. Interesting. It looks as though maybe initially it's after the knight. This is taken. No, this is bad because of check, basically, and that's not very nice for white's king. That's not the intention at all. Yeah, if king c1, you know, queen takes. No, in this position, knight d4 hitting the queen, and it looks as though maybe was the point knight takes f5. No, this is no good either because bishop f6, and we're looking down at white's king. It's just a draw apparently with best play. Weird stuff going on with bishop d4 and a queen sack. Apparently this is equal from an engine point of view. It's looking at the rook. No, that wasn't played. White plays now knight c6. This is the crushing move. So forking these guys. Okay, and black now played knight f4. That was taken. Knight takes e7 check. Knight takes f5. And we've got this very dangerous knight here coordinating with the queen. Knight king g6, have check. Knight f5 again. Now rook f1 hitting the queen. h4. Here, if queen h5, then check is very good to win the queen. So we see queen f6, check, check. Knight h6 check wins the queen here, and black resigned. So this was back in 2008. Very great stuff in 2008. Okay, I think that ends the session. Yeah, I thought it was interesting to have a look at a few of his classic sacrifices, but you know, there's vast complexity to them. They're not like you know, mate in 2 or mate in 3 puzzles. So there's a vast complexity of analysis just from those positions, actually. But you get a glimpse of the insight that he must have had. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this week. See you next week. Comments or questions on YouTube. Okay, thanks very much.